Hey y'all, welcome back to the Work from Homesteader. This week, I thought I would just take you along for an entire week of made from scratch meals and how me and my family do it. If you are new around here, I am a mom of two and I also work full time, as does my husband. Right now, we are in the South, and we are originally from the Midwest, and so we are here for a couple more months until we are moved back home, and we are making the best of it. And I am absolutely loving the ability to get fresh produce around here since it is ready so much sooner. So this is what my Sunday looks like sometimes. Sometimes I'm not as good as at prepping as I would like to be, but I'm really trying to get better because when the work week starts, you guys, I just don't have the time to sit and cut fruit. As soon as we put the kids down to bed, you guys, I am asleep myself. I I did not want to get back up after I put the kids down. So here I am prepping melon for the week, and you guys, if I don't cut a melon right away, it is just gonna sit on my counter, I promise you. And I saw these golden beets at the store, and I just could not pass them up. I I love beets, but I don't prepare them as much as I should. So I am just cutting these up into strips. We're going to put them on a sandwich later on. So you'll see these, and you guys, they are so good. I saw something similar on Pinterest, and I kind of combined a bunch of recipes I was looking at, and that's just kind of how I cook, you guys. I see stuff and I think, I could probably do that. And I just kind of try it and figure it out and learn by doing. So I'm just chopping these up, and I'm going to roast them at 450-ish for, I think I put them in there between 30 and 40 minutes. Usually once you start to smell them, that's when they're ready, and you just want them to be kind of tender for this. And now I'm trying my hand at some sauerkraut. And for those of you that are seasoned sauerkraut makers, you probably realize that I needed to cut this much thinner, but that's okay. We learn by doing. So next time I would definitely shred this or cut it much thinner, but it still turned out awesome for what we're going to make it for. And so I'm just making this for this week, so we're going to eat it later in the week with a recipe, which you guys, I totally made up from scratch, and I think it's going to be in the rotation now. It was pretty darn good. So I'm just doing cabbage and carrots here. So I'm shredding up the carrots so that they're a similar texture to the cabbage. And then the recipe that I read, it said to do 2 tablespoons of salt to 1 head of cabbage, and as you can see, I have a little bit more salt there. It came out a little bit heavy, but that's okay. We really like salty things, and I feel like it was the perfect flavor for what I ended up putting it in anyways. And so I'm just massaging it into the cabbage and carrots here, and the goal is to extract the water so that when we put it into the jar, it'll completely submerge in liquid, and that's what helps ferment it and keep it from molding. And so here I am just putting it into a quart mason jar, and then I'm going to take the bottom of a wooden spoon and push that down there, because you really want to compact it as much as you can and really push those liquids up. And so I just did this until it was completely full, and then I took one of the outside leaves of the cabbage, and I just put it on top there, and I covered it, and then I just made sure that I burped it every day, and that it wasn't getting all of the gases weren't gonna explode. And so the next thing I did was prep some sourdough bread. And if you follow me already, you saw that I recently posted how I make my sourdough bread, and it was my non-recipe. I really don't follow a recipe for sourdough bread. I just go based on touch and feel. So I still do a lot of the same mechanics and stuff that you might see on other people's recommendations, but I don't make a big deal about it, just because I'm a busy mom of two, and I don't have the time to time my stretch and folds. I'm nursing, I'm doing all these things. I just don't have that time. So I'm just getting that prepped. And in the meantime, I'm going to make some granola bars for the week. And these actually are going to make it into the next week. We still had some left over at the end of the week, but I put about 3 cups of oats, and then I put the remaining sunflower kernel seeds that I had, and then I'm putting about like a half a cup of honey here. Now, if you want them to stay together a little bit more, I would put more towards like 3/4 of a cup. But we usually just eat them right out of the fridge, and so they stay together really well. And I just don't like super sweet bars. Like even a half a cup for me is like almost too sweet, but that's okay. Like you have to kind of find that balance between it staying together and, whether it's too sweet. So I put like a little bit of extra salt in there, and that really helps balance it out for me. And I just put like a little splash of vanilla just for a little extra flavor. And I put a heaping amount of peanut butter, probably close to like 3/4 a cup to a cup, I would say. These are really nice and peanut buttery. And this brand I like because it doesn't have any added oil or sugar in it. So I know when I'm making it, I'm not like changing the flavor profile too much. So if you do have like a peanut butter with sugar, you might want to lessen the honey a little bit. And then I also put some coconut oil in there to kind of combine too. So I am just putting it in a parchment lined glass container, and I am just pushing it down as firmly as I can to make sure that everything is combined really well. And then I'm just going to throw it right in the fridge. And now it's the next day. I let this dough sit overnight. My husband has been keeping it really cool in our house. It was like 65 this day. So it took a really long time for everything to proof. So that's why I left it overnight, and it wasn't really overproofed or anything. And I am just putting it back in the bowl here with a tablecloth, a kitchen cloth, and I'm just putting it into the fridge. I'm gonna bake it in the next day. So I just thought I'd take you through some of the breakfasts too that we eat. So we had some leftover sausages that I cut up, mixed with some eggs and some tomatoes, and a little bit of toast as well. And then this is later on in the day. I made up some pasta dough because we were planning on having pasta on Monday night. And I wanted to get everything prepped, especially since it was a sourdough pasta dough. And so I like to give that a little bit of time to ferment. And I won't go through like my entire process here because I actually do already have a video on how I make my pasta dough, which I think will be really helpful. And I'll make sure I link it in the description. But here I'm actually trying a little bit of whole wheat and just like regular all-purpose flour combination. My husband loves whole wheat pasta, and I've been a little bit afraid to try it just because I don't mind the taste of whole wheat, but like I don't love a lot of the whole wheat pasta that you find in the store. Like I just think the texture is really weird, and I don't know, I don't love it, but my husband does, which is like I'm really happy for that because he's adventurous and will try healthy things. But I don't know, I was just afraid he was going to like it too much, and then I would have to make it all the time if I'm honest. So I got that prepped, and I am just throwing the bread in the oven this on Monday evening, just so I can get it prepped so for the rest of the week. And we actually ended up going out to eat on Monday. I know that's so bad, but we usually don't. And I just want to show you guys these new shorts that I got, just super sidetracked. I ordered these online from a gal who makes them herself. So I'll drop just a link in the description. I am not affiliated with her at all, but I am obsessed with buying clothes from her now because they're just so high quality and so nice. But this is how that bread turned out. It was really good. So this is the next day. As I mentioned, we ended up going out to eat on Monday because my husband took our son on a little like daddy Sunday, and then we ended up actually just all eating out together, which is totally fine. Like usually we don't eat out that early in the week. We usually are exhausted and do it on the weekends, but anyway, so it kind of threw me for a loop, and the pasta was a little bit, it was definitely fermented, and I was trying a new thing where I put it in the towel instead of plastic to kind of let it sit, but it definitely got a crust on it, which I did not like, but otherwise it rolled out just fine. So here now I am prepping the meatballs. So we're going to make meatballs with our pasta, but it's going to be more of like a garlic, parsley, onion flavor. It's not going to be like a traditional Italian, and there's no like sausage in here. It's all beef. So I'm just whipping that all together, and I am going to put some eggs in there too. So I usually do like 1 egg per pound of meat. And so I'm just going to crack that in there. And after that, I'm going to put in some almond flour. So you could totally do like breadcrumbs or panko or anything that you have. I just didn't have any of that on hand, and I just really didn't feel like toasting up some of the bread that I made. Just was not feeling it. So I did almond flour, and it actually turned out really great. I was a little nervous that it wasn't going to absorb the moisture really well, but it was perfect. So I actually might use it in the future because it's kind of a nice like additional protein source in the meatballs. So I was kind of digging that. So I just usually, I mix with my hands, it's like God's best kitchen tool that he gave you. So I just like to kind of use that to mix everything together, and I'm going to have to use my hands anyways to make the meatballs. I guess you could also use like an ice cream scooper, if you really don't want to get your hands dirty, but I mean, I'm already in the kitchen. I don't mind. So, just a little bit of rocking the baby. I swear, she is just not loving her wrap lately, and it's sometimes getting a little bit tough to get things done in the kitchen, but that's just motherhood. And so, okay, I'm making these kind of small, on the smaller side. I wanted even smaller, but I swear, I try to make meatballs small, and I just end up making, like, I feel like they start to progressively get bigger the more that I make them, because I'm just sick of rolling them together. So I try to be consistent and make them all the same size because it definitely makes it easier to cook. And so I just put these together, and then I took out my iron skillet and I turned that on like medium, and I just started to place them on there, and I cooked them probably like 4 to 5 minutes each side. You just want to cook them until you're not really seeing too much pink, and you'll start to kind of get an idea of when they're done. And I like when they're like, they have a nice little crispy coating on the outside because it tastes so dang good. It's like, well, that's where all the flavor's at. So I just turn them and cook them, and then I ended up having to do 2 batches, so I did 2 pounds of ground beef. Now, I think for like the ground beef to pasta ratio, I actually would probably just do 1 pound in the future. I think that there was like too many meatballs to pasta, but if your family really likes meat, I mean, mine does too, but I just think that there was too much for us to eat per pasta. So I left all of that great grease drippings in there, and I put in a whole stick of butter, and then I cut up some asparagus as well because this is in season, and you guys, it was so good. So I just let it kind of cook up in there for a couple minutes, get a little bit softer. I don't like my asparagus like too overcooked. And then once the pasta is done, you can go ahead and put it directly into the pan and try to get a little bit of that pasta water if you can, because it has really great thickening properties in it. So it'll make the sauce just a little bit thicker because of all of the flour. Then we're going to toss in all of our cooked meatballs. And I wish I would have done this last step before I put the meatballs in, but I actually put in a little bit of sour cream. It was Greek yogurt, but you can use sour cream too. I prefer that, but that's just what I had on hand. And it just made it like a little bit creamy, and it was so dang good. I also threw in a little bit of garlic powder in here as well, just for a little bit of flavoring. But this dish was like definitely one of our new favorites, and we are absolutely going to keep making this. All right, so we are circling back to those beets that we made earlier in the week, and we are going to make a super awesome goat cheese, beet, and Gouda sandwich. Now, I saw something on Pinterest that was kind of similar to this and like a few other sandwiches, and I just kind of combined them together into something that kind of sounded good. And I really wasn't sure if the beets would be good on the sandwich, but you guys, they were so good. It was like just really this like awesome earthy kind of sweet flavor with it. And I found this Gouda that was on clearance at the store too. It was kind of a fancier cheese that was going bad quickly. So I used it up really quick, but it was so dang good and I was really glad to have grabbed it. And I put some arugula on there too, just to have some fresh greens and some really nice taste on there. And I just put some butter in a hot cast iron skillet, and I just put it on there and I toasted both sides. Just make sure you're watching it to make sure that it doesn't burn at all. But you guys, this was so good. You really need a few minutes on each side, and it just warms up the cheeses and gets them nice and melty. I would definitely make these again. And these are the granola bars that we made earlier in the week. I just cut them up for a snack later in the day, and you can see that they're nice and firm, but they're so good. Now, this is Wednesday night, I think, and we were just trying to use up some leftovers middle of the week so that we didn't have anything go to waste. That's really been one of my goals this year, is to really reduce the amount of things that we throw out because it just feels so wasteful. So I'm just using up some chicken that we had made late last week. And I'm just cutting it up to make some chicken salad. And there was really only enough for me. And so that's what I did for myself. And my husband ate some other leftovers. But I'm just cutting up the chicken, a little bit of celery, and I made some homemade mayo. I do have a recipe and a video on making homemade ranch. And to make the homemade ranch, you have to make the homemade mayo. So if you are looking to learn how to make either, I'll link the video in the description so that you can learn how to make those. And so I just put a little bit of garlic, a little bit of salt and pepper, and then some onion flakes, which are like the true stars of the show, is the onion flakes. And then I just threw some arugula in there because I was like, well, let's just use that up. I don't really otherwise use a lot of salad or arugula in our daily meals, which I probably should, but it's okay. And I just threw on some Ritz crackers. My husband picked them up. My son saw them in the store and he really wanted them. So otherwise we usually don't eat too many of those, but they tasted so good with the chicken salad. I highly recommend. Now, this is the next day, and I am going to cook up some stew meat that we got from a local farm stand that I found, which I've really grown to like. They have some really beautiful cuts of meat, and I've been really happy with them. So I'm just throwing this in the Instapot. I'm going to brown it on both sides. I really like to get a little bit of color on our beef before we either pressure cook it or slow cook it. It just really gets a lot of flavor in there. And don't forget to salt and pepper everything. Definitely is key to having like well-seasoned meat, is like a good amount of salt and pepper. So while that's browning, I'm going to go ahead and whip up the biscuits. I used to get really intimidated about making biscuits, but honestly, they're so easy, and I don't know. I guess I've stopped worrying about making everything perfect. Now, like, even I melted the butter for this because I just did not feel like shredding butter, to be honest. And guys, they still turned out so great. Like, yes, they will be so much better, or like, they'll be, incrementally better if you shred the butter and you have all that flakiness, but they still turned out really good without doing that. Now here I'm just putting a little bit of milk, and I only put in like a little bit at a time to make sure that it doesn't get too wet. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a rolling pin and roll out the dough. And I know that, if you mix it up too much, you'll start to get the butter melted, but I already melted it, so we don't have to worry about that. And so I'm just going to take the a glass that I have and use that as a cutter later on. And here I'm just putting in some water into the Instapot so that we can start to pressure cook it. And I did it for about an hour or so. I really next time would probably do it a little bit longer just because I want it to be even more tender than it turned out, but that's okay. It still turned out really good. You can still cut it up and everything if it doesn't get as tender as you would like it. And so here I am just going to shred up the cheese. This is a sharp white cheddar cheese, and this is usually what I find on sale around me a lot. It's like 2 for $5 for 8 ounces, which is a pretty good deal around me. And I'm just going to cut up some celery and some onion for a little bit of extra flavor. I just do those in this skillet with some butter before I threw the rest of it together, just to kind of get those caramelizing and get just that extra flavor in there. So after I cut that up, I went and I released the pressure from the Instapot. It was ready, and I always try to make it turn so it doesn't go right underneath the cabinets. I'm always afraid of like starting a fire. I'm sure it's an irrational fear, but once I was done, I took that over to the stove and I started to take the meat out, and that's when I was like, oh shoot, it's not as tender as I would like. But then I just started to cut it up on the cutting board and it was totally fine. And I just cut those into small pieces, and it was still pretty tender when we ate it, so I was pretty happy about that. But don't be afraid to throw it back in the Instapot if you have the time. I was a little bit crunched on time, so I didn't. But here's that sauerkraut that we made earlier in the week, and you guys, this tasted so good, even though it was only fermenting for like 4 days at this point. I was really happy with the flavor. Obviously, the longer you ferment it, the more flavor it's going to be. But this turned out really, really good. And so I just mixed it with the beef. And then once that was mixed up, I put in the cheese there. And I just made sure that everything was really well incorporated. And that way that everything melted really evenly within it. And once the cheese was mixed up, then I put on the biscuits. And I just tried to kind of place them all around the skillet, so that every kind of scoop that you would take out had a nice biscuit on top, because, if you're eating it, you're going to want a biscuit for sure. So I try to make sure that every portion had a biscuit. So then I threw it into the oven at 450 for about 12 minutes. I do wish I would have put the biscuits in a little bit longer, just because they have kind of that moisture underneath it. I think they need to cook a little bit longer. But you guys, it was so good, and I'm definitely going to put that in the rotation. So here I am just whipping up our pizza dough, and I am trying out the mixture of the whole wheat again. And I have to say I really liked how it turned out. And this is just my usual pizza dough. I've made this quite a few times on some other videos, so I'll link those in the description below so that you can go ahead and try those if you would like. And so like I've said a million times, I really don't measure anything, and I know that can be tough sometimes, but like really, as the more you work and feel some of the stuff that you make on a regular basis, you really will be able to eyeball a lot of that stuff. So I'm just mixing this up here, and then I realized, oh shoot, I forgot my sourdough. And so I just put it right in there, you guys. It really doesn't have to be anything special. It was a little bit messy, definitely doing it that way, but if you forget an ingredient, you can always kind of add it in on the back end. You don't have to worry too much. And plus, with the fermentation of this, it definitely helps you kind of mask any of the errors you've made. So this is about a couple hours later. I'm just rolling this out now into a flat pizza disc to put into the cast iron skillet. Now, I usually try to put my cast iron in the oven at 450-ish before, while I'm kind of prepping a lot of the initial ingredients. That way it gets nice and hot. And here I'm just shredding up the rest of that Gouda cheese. So I'm going to try and make here a Beet Gouda goat cheese type of pizza. And I have to say it turned out pretty good. Hey, and that's the original pizza that I made, just cheese and pepperoni. My husband and my son really like that. So I always try to make a creative pizza and then a staple pizza, because my husband is just a real cheese and pepperoni guy. But so here you can see I am putting the pizza dough into the hot iron skillet, and then I'm going to put the goat cheese on there, and I just kind of crumbled it in there, and I took the back of a spoon and pushed it all along the dough. And then I also put the beets on and the Gouda, and it was so good. I think next time I would put another sauce on there, but it was the makings of a really good pizza. Then we finished out the night with some cake for my 30th birthday, and it was so good, you guys. And if you like these videos, I'm going to link a really nice playlist for you with all my other videos that are similar, and go ahead and watch those. And if you have any time, like and subscribe. Thank you.